Glamorous death energy. I can resist anything except temptation. Oscar Wilde said that. Glamour and death energy don't have to go together, but often do. Their intermingling is a magnetic coupling favored by both cosmos and psyche. And by favored, I mean habitually created, not favored in the sense of their being good, of course. And by death energy, I'm not referring to any of the transformational aspects of death, like crossing the event horizon, but I'm using death energy as more of a synonym for darkness and decadence, and that which takes you away from the experience of meaning and is not life affirming in any way, shape, or form. Glamour and death energy synergize into a precious, an all attractive jewel, glittering in the dark, mesmerizing your gaze, and compelling you to reach for that which forever eludes your grasp. Glamorous death energy invites you toward the promise of sweet delight, set so brilliantly against the backdrop of eternal night. Glamorous death energy is like the speedy edge of the merry-go-round, spinning you into outer darkness. Glamorous death energy sparkles and seduces you to plummet through the wrong end of a telescope, where monomanias shrink your soul. The dark force, like the devil who hath the ability to assume a pleasing form, often comes to us in a glamorous, seductive manifestation. For example, it may come to us as a charismatic, attractive person who would like you to join them in their downward spiral. In other cases, the glamour radiates from white powders, volatile fluids, happening scenes, video screens, gurus, answers for everything ideologies, one-size-fits-all fundamentalisms, and myriad other forms and guises. For me, the East Village of New York City, where I lived in the early to mid-'80s, was ground zero of glamorous death energy. An exciting scene was exploding there, and much of it was highly novel and creative. The neighborhood I lived in, it was basically 10th and A, like right across from Tompkins Park, called Needle Park in the 60s. It was the punk capital of the world, and fascinating mutants from everywhere abounded on the streets 24/7. But then, of course, we called Alphabet Town, avenues A, B, C, and D, I guess, were a 24/7 drug bazaar, and there were a lot of like abandoned buildings with squatters in them, and so on. Allen Ginsberg lived a block away, and I saw him on the street frequently, as well as Quentin Crisp, Madonna, Grace Jones, and many others whose names are forgotten, but whose faces glitter in the night of time. I was friends with the late, great Keith Haring, whose first shows were at the Fun Gallery right across the street from my building. And I would often talk to him about Jung and the singularity archetype. He was getting into semiotics at the time. 50 storefront art galleries were ever-changing portals into the mutating visual imaginations of fellow late baby boomer mutants. Kenny Scharf was another one of the great artists of that era, still around. Unlike Keith, who never, unfortunately, made it very far into the 80s before succumbing to AIDS. Keith also helped. I was, at the same time, besides living in the East Village, I was working in the South Bronx during the crack epidemic at a South Bronx public high school, where I was also the building security coordinator. So it was kind of a dangerous zone in multiple ways at this phase of my life. And Keith, I was friends, was also the ground zero for the birth of hip hop in the South Bronx at the time. And I was a mentor to some of the early graffiti writers and got some of their work shown at the Fun Gallery, also with the help of Keith Haring. But dark threads were wove potently through this harlequin-colored tapestry. I began wondering why there were so many casualties. Why was almost everyone, including me, wearing black? Um, why so many were getting sucked into addiction and toxic promiscuity? And for that matter, why did the whole atmosphere crackle with the neon colors of glamorously tragic magic? Never underestimate the power of the dark force to put on a coat of many sparkling colors and pull you into a dark alley where, within sweet shadowy depths, sharing a syringe may seem sexy and alluring. When there is a wave of novelty, and I'm all for waves of novelty, it means that both the outer edge of dark and the outer edge of light intensify. If you want to surf such powerful waves, be wary about where you are with respect to those edges, because sometimes the outer edge of light and the outer edge of dark fold together like Damascus steel, or like the East Village of the early 80s. The positive aspect is that this is an auspicious time to become more aware of the siren call of glamorous death energy. Be a magician, not a victim of tragic magic. And I wrote about my East Village years in my fantasy sci-fi epic, Parallel Journeys, which you can read free on this site or get it in any form on Audible. On Amazon, including an Audible version, which I think is probably the best. But the epilogue of this book, I put in a link directly to the epilogue on the body of this card, gets into my life in the East Village in the early 80s, tells some stories from that era, and why it was I associated it with the Twilight Zone. But of course, you'd be getting plot spoilers to read the end of the book first. But it also I also included a link to my very first video, the very earliest one, when I was about 25 or 26 years old. Some African American friends said they were coming over and wanted to record me doing a video of me doing something, and so I came up with my own religion to perform. It was about a 37-minute video. You can see what I look like at 25 or 26. I don't know if it's just me, but I feel like I looked a lot younger 40 years ago. Tell me what you think, or actually only tell me if you think that's not the case, because otherwise it would be unflattering to hear about. And be wary, because this is an era, as a good part of the 20th and 21st centuries is, of lots of glamorous death energy. Don't let it suck you in.